in schools. 1300 222 612 is the number, or you can text 0467 922 612. Craig in Bald Hills has said, get rid of chaplains too. They're just recruiting for the Scripture Union, which is part of the Baptist Church. And then on Twitter, our handle is @612 Brisbane, and Nick has said, when my daughter did a gap year in England, religious studies was a study of faith and all religions. What do you think students should be taught about religion at school? 1300 222 612. Ron Williams has won 2 High Court challenges against the federal government's school chaplaincy program. After the last challenge, the federal government changed the legislation to hand administration over to states and territories. He's a director of Secular Public Education, a non-for-profit group, and a registered charity. Ron, what's your reaction to the step taken by the principal at Windsor State School to suspend instruction by the Connect program?
It's probably a good move if they feel that isn't appropriate for the children in religious instruction. Religious instruction, though, is supposed to be there for the children of that particular faith. So one would expect, if they're following the law according to the enrolment forms, that the only children in that class should be Christians to start with. So I guess, but
it doesn't seem to be the case. But I just wonder generally if you've heard of other schools where there were concerns that perhaps the instructors were trying to recruit the students.
We know, Emma, we through Secular Public Education, we receive numerous complaints, sometimes almost on a daily basis. But I've got to say that we never get people complaining about the content of what the children are getting in religious instruction. The complaints that we get are 99% parents complaining that their children are in religious instruction when they've put contrary information on their enrolment form, as in leaving it blank or putting some other worldview on there, such as philosophical or something like that. So that's primarily the complaints that we get. We don't hear any complaints about the content because mostly the parents that are complaining don't want their kids in there
at all in the first place.
That's right.
And what are your concerns about religious instruction in schools?
Look, the only complaint that we have had all through the years with religious instruction in Queensland certainly is that it just doesn't adhere to legislation, that's all. If the law was followed, and the Act was written in 1910, of course, but it was mostly designed then to keep the Protestants separate from the Catholics, but because everybody was probably something in 1910. But the only problem that we have with it is that the law isn't followed, and it isn't policy, it is statute, and we just have a situation where over 70% of parents choose to leave the enrolment form blank these days when it comes to the religion question. And of course, under legislation, children can't be placed with anybody other than their own denomination. So if they have a blank form, they really can't be placed anywhere. And the enrolment form, to satisfy the needs of the One School database, which started evolving over about 5 years ago, makes it quite clear as to what will happen to the children, depending on what's written in that space, marked religion. And so parents are quite well informed as what will happen. And so, as I said, over 70% choose to leave it blank. So they obviously don't wish their children to go anywhere.
Ron, can you clear up something for me? Is it an opt-in system for religious education in state schools, or is it opt-out?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Look, it's really opt-in and opt-out in one go, Emma, because, as I said, the enrolment form has a religion question, and it used to be just a question saying response optional. But as I said, with the One School database evolving, they needed to sort of put some information on there as to what would happen regarding what you put into that space. So what you put in there is either opt-in or opt-out. I can tell you what the question says. I have it in front of me.
But is the process for opting in and out of religious instruction at school clear for parents?
Well, it's not clear, and I'll tell you why. It's not clear because parents get all kinds of contrary information at school level, so it's kind of open slather as to what goes in the school handbooks or whatever it might be, or in school newsletters. And so I was involved in 2013. What has become Secular Public Education was an informal parent group then called Secular Public Education Lobby, fancy title, but we were just a trademark. And at that stage, I was honoured to be invited to meetings at Mary Street to look at sorting out religious instruction and chaplaincy policy, and that was through the midst of my second High Court case, I think it was, and everybody was very civil, and we all got on very well because we didn't ever mention the HC, the High Court word, but it was great, and there was a very progressive Assistant Director General at that stage, and we designed, the whole process was designed to go nowhere else between the enrolment form and what happened at school. And that's why it should have been quite simple. Yes, parents are confused because they get so much misinformation, and misinformation coming often, as I said, from at school level from people that should know better.
So what would you like as an alternative in schools instead of religious instruction?
Well, I'll tell you what we'd like. We have religious instruction, as I said, since 1910. It's enshrined in legislation. And until that gets removed from there, that's how it is. What we'd want, only two things. We would like to see legislation followed to the letter, which is only fair. If that happened, I think you'd find that there'd be about, as happened in Victoria, there'd be about probably 20% or less of children actually being put into religious instruction. And when you get those sorts of numbers, politicians see that there aren't many votes in it, so they kind of move it out of school hours as they did in Victoria. Okay. That's one thing. But we're not only here bleating about religious instruction. Yes, we have recently devised a program. Well, it's been on the book since about 2011 when I used to speak to a carer about it in Sydney. But we have a program called Faith, Philosophy and Fable, A History of Human Contemplation, which we are starting to develop now.
Have any schools picked it up?
No, not yet. It's still in development, Emma. But it's even beyond comparative religion. Always sounds a bit spooky to me because to compare religions with religions to kids at school when 70% or more of their parents leave the question blank probably isn't all that required. But what we think is required is a full history of human contemplation going right back to the very earliest of when humans started to consider what...
That sounds like a good conversation to have. Hey, Ron Williams.
Sounds like a great one, yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
spe.org.au if parents would like to have a bit of a look around at what we're doing.
Okay, Ron Williams, thank you very much. He's the Director of Secular Public Education. Your call's in a moment. Looking at the traffic, there is a crash at Holland Park West at Birdwood Road.